All right, so I want to give a chemtrail update for Tampa Bay today, and I'd like to show you what I consider to be a chemtrail-free day. Okay, so you can see, obviously, there's some distortion in the atmosphere over there. I don't know what that is. It's either pollution or it's just natural atmospheric particles, dust from somewhere, you know, whatever. Maybe some moisture, maybe moisture can sort of make it. You might not be able to tell from the camera, but where the sun is, it's, I mean, it might just be washed out, colorless sky because the sun is setting there. So, now there are some clouds around toward the east, but I mean, they're obviously fluffy, normal, what I now consider to be, normal clouds. Now there is one trail of something going over there, very light. Don't know what it is. Definitely looks like it could be a chemtrail. You know, but why is there one? I don't know. But yesterday, wow, yesterday was a total wreck. I mean, the sky was just wrecked yesterday. So I was wishing I could do a chemtrail report, but I forget what the reason was. Was it too late? Was I tired? Was probably my phone was dead. That's probably what it was. And the thing of it was that yesterday, like 60, 70%, maybe 80% of the visible sky was just covered. I think yesterday was a combination of chemtrails and clouds. I think that's what it was. But the more I looked at the sky, the more I started to think that there was a lot more chemtrails than clouds, because I could see fresh chemtrails being laid down, and then about a half an hour later I would look at those chemtrails and they were you know, pretty expanded. You know, and if chemtrail first lays down, that's the thing that's so hard to wrap your head around, or the deceptive element of it all is how much these contrails, I just can't believe they're contrails. I can't believe that a plane can leave a trail that not only does it last for hours, okay? All right, that's, if it's vapor, is it really gonna just sit there and sit there for hours and hours? I find that hard to believe. And I've seen a couple of pilots on YouTube talk about it. They're like, no, contrails are not, they're not, you know, they're not trails that are, again, I keep harping on this over and over again, but you know, they're not trails in the sky that are the width of the airplane itself, A, that B, last for hours, and that C, expand out to 100 times their original width. I mean, that just, you know, but you know, this is just amazing. It's so hard to wrap your head around it, because you want to believe that it's nothing. That's what you want to believe. Number one. Number two, you don't want to believe that it's something as fantastical as all this. And yet you have people like Al Gore, and I think the guy's name was David Keith, if I'm not mistaken, the author of that book, I believe that, I mean, my memory, you know, I just have to keep saying, I believe, as I recall, things like that. Because I don't recall, I'm not, you know, I'm not an expert. I don't spend hours and hours and hours a month or a week or a day studying this stuff. It's just casual observation and passing, you know. But I think the guy's name was David Keith, and I think the name of his book was A Case for Geoengineering. You know, and then you got that lady, that former Air Force, she was like I think the way she described her job was like, she was like the Air Force version of OSHA. You know, occupational safety, health advisory, occupational safety and hazard advisory, whatever it is, whatever OSHA stands for. You know, but her job was to go around and make sure that people weren't being exposed to dangerous chemicals. And she, what was her name? Something like, not Megan Kelly. It was some, I think her last name was Megan. because it was a strange name to have as a last name. I remember that. Something Meghan. But if you just go on YouTube and type in Air Force Chemtrail, Air Force Lady Chemtrail, I mean, you'll find it. Kelly Meghan, maybe? What's her name? Something like that. Kristen Meghan? Might have been Kristen Meghan. But, yeah, she'll let you email her privately, and which I think is fascinating. And she will tell you places you can send air samples to, air and water samples to be tested for like $50, you know. And you got Al Gore, this David Keith guy, and there was another guy too. Al Gore was on the Ellen DeGeneres Show. This guy, David Keith, if that's his actual name, and my memory isn't failing me, he was on the Stephen Colbert Show, and then there was another guy on the Stephen Colbert Show as well. They were saying that they're dumping like 51 million tons of sulphuric acid into the air to quote unquote save the planet from global warming. I mean, this is, you know, in my video, The Nature of Mass Deception, I talked about the fact that the way they do it is, it's not with outright bold-faced lies. I mean, I gotta put a little asterisk on that, because it is outright bold-faced lies. But it's not, man, it's sophistry, okay? It's sophistry. These things are outright bold-faced lies, but they're the kind of lie. It's like art, man. It's like art. They're lies that, on the one hand, are outright and bold-faced. Bald-faced. Is it bold-faced or bald-faced? It must be bald-faced. On the one hand, it is outright and bald-faced. On the other hand, it's like, yeah, but it could plausibly, conceivably, potentially, theoretically, possibly be true. But it's like, the more you look into it, it's like, no, this is not true. There's no way. There's no way an airplane, there's no way a contrail, okay, is the width of the airplane itself and lasts for hours and hours and hours in the sky, and that expands, and that as it expands, it maintains its original visibility. I mean, there's just no way. There's no way. That's it. I mean, there's just, you know, but these authority figures, they come and they tell you that it's contrails, and you know what they're doing? They're preying on our innocence. They're preying on our virtue. This is a perfect example. I mean, it's innocence that causes us to believe what we're told, right? I mean, that's innocence. It's like, okay, I mean, we're not in a fighting stance. We're in an open, trusting, peaceable stance. I mean, that's our stance, right? That's how they prey on our innocence. They prey on our virtue because we're trusting. We trust our fellow man. Not only do we trust our fellow man, but even more so is what I mean to say. But even more so, we trust our leaders, right? That's our virtue. We trust our leaders. I mean, that's what the Bible says, right? I forget the exact quote. I think it's in Romans, but it says the government, Caesar, or what's the exact terminology that it uses? The ruling authorities, I guess. The ruling authorities were not given the sword for no reason, is what it says. And you know, it also talks about the ruling authorities being installed by God as well. So I mean, it's virtuous to read that and to respect it and to make observance of it in our lives, right? And so these people like Al Gore, these other, I mean, truly evil people. I mean, it's so evil, so unbelievably evil, that a person with an ounce of innocence could never believe that they are who they are. That's what it really is. That's what it really means to have your innocence preyed upon, to have your virtue preyed upon, exploited, you know, for billions and billions of dollars. That's really what it means, I think. But, you know, the Bible also exhorts us to be, if I'm not mistaken in the terminology here, to be as wise as serpents and as innocent as doves. So I think we fall down. You know, I mean, the Bible makes a myriad, a spectrum of demands upon us. You know, and one of the things, in one of the places, it says or exhorts us, maybe not through moral teaching, but rather through a story told to us. I'm not sure about that in this case, but basically, I think it was Samuel and Saul. I think it was Samuel telling Saul to be careful to do everything the Lord commands. You know, so we really fall down on the wise as servants. You know, another thing. Let's see, you know, like in software, you have exploits, right? The hackers, they find an exploit. They find a weakness in the software, and they exploit it. They worm in. Now, I'll tell you, to be honest with you, in our day, these exploits are engineered. NSA, all these government agencies, especially under Obama, purportedly. The government orders these corporations to leave these exploits open because they want to exploit them to, quote unquote, keep us safe, right? I mean, it's a whole part of the national security thing. The problem is, there's a guy named Eric Schneier. Again, I'm going by memory, so I think that's his name. Eric Schneier, who has a software IT security blog. The problem is that these exploits proliferate. You know, they develop these devices, they develop this software. The government makes regulations or laws or edicts or executive orders or whatever. They command these companies to leave these exploits open. They develop these products, and these products have all these exposed exploits. And if they want to close an exploit, they have to go back and get permission to close the exploit. You know, so as more and more and more products come out, obviously the path of least resistance is just not to ask for permission to close the exploit and to leave the exploit open. I mean, it's not their problem. It's not their problem. It's not their fault if they were ordered to leave an exploit open, and they develop new products, and the exploit in the previous product that corresponds to the same place in the device or the software in the new product. I mean, they can't make the assumption that, well, they told us to leave it open before, but now we have to close it. No, they have to go back and ask for clarification. The easiest thing to do is just to leave it open. I mean, because that's the way you did it before. So these things proliferate. Now there's actually a black market of known and directed exploits where agencies sell the information to other agencies as to how to technically exploit these open exploits. It's a verb and a noun. You exploit an exploit. In software, it's called an exploit when you have an open, like it's basically a back door, you know, or an open door. You have to know how to access it. You know, you have to know the keywords or the commands or the, you know, strategy or whatever, the technical strategy. You have to know how. So they sell this information to you. Well, obviously, when you have this stuff proliferating, it gets into the wrong hands, you know, because it just will. I mean, inevitably it will. Hackers will discover it, or, you know, somebody that works for some of these companies that knows about it is not necessarily a good person, or somebody who's in government who knows about it, not necessarily a good person, or they are a good person, but they fall on hard times financially, and so they're pressured by their circumstances to do things they wouldn't otherwise do. You know, that's the way it is, you know. And then once that knowledge takes that first leap from legitimate use to illegitimate use, well, then it's game over. Because, I mean, if they'll use the information illegitimately, they will share the information illegitimately, right? So, I mean, it's all over, right? It's it. You just have to make the assumption that it's known worldwide at that point in time. So, but then they're not gonna tell, the government is gonna go back, oh, well, this exploit has made that leap, we have to close it. Now, that's not how they do it. That's not how they work. They need that exploit. That's why they ordered that the exploit be left open. So they're just gonna shrug their shoulders and say, oh well, whatever. We'll manage the crisis when it occurs. You know, oh, and by the way, crises work to our advantage because we exploit crises like a prospector, you know, exploits a mine shaft, you know, for looking for gold. You know, we the more crises, the more powerful and the more rich government becomes, because if we have a crisis, we need somebody to solve the crisis. Well, who do you solve? Who do you get to solve the crisis? Everybody looks to the government. They don't stop and think, wait a minute, they're the people that created the crisis. They don't do that. They're in crisis mode. You know, they're in reaction mode at that point in time. You don't sit there and analyze things when you're in crisis mode. You know, you just try to stem the blood loss. You know, you try to. So anyway, how'd I get off on all this stuff about exploits? I can't remember. I was talking about chemtrails, Al Gore, David Keith, this lady Kristen Meghan, I think her name is, and this other guy, and I mean, so yeah, so I don't know how I got off on that stuff about exploits. But today's a clear day. They haven't been doing anything. Yesterday it was a wreck. I mean, the entire sky was covered in clouds, and God is my witness. If I hadn't noticed that one day when I was going to work, that it was a perfectly clear sky, with the exception of these airplanes, like 5-6 of them flying in formation, the entire, what appeared to me to be the entire length of the county, and leaving these trails behind them that lasted for hours and hours and hours, and that expanded into big cloud. Basically, they turn into giant cloud banks that cover the entire air. I mean, if I hadn't seen the clear sky against the back, you know, as a backdrop for these plane trails, whatever these trails are, you're going to try to tell me that they're contrails, vapor trails, the vapor trails that are the entire width, that are the same width as the airplane itself. What the heck is that? What kind of atmospheric conditions would you have to have a vapor trail the width of the airplane itself? That doesn't make any sense. Okay, well, let's just say for the sake of argument, okay, yeah, well, a contrail is the width of the airplane itself. Doesn't make any sense, but okay, let's just say that. All right, how do these vapor trails stay up there for hours and hours and hours, you know, throughout the day? As the day grows hot, as the sun comes up and the air heats up, these vapor trails just stay right where they were. Oh, and by the way, they expand to, like, you know, 10 or 20 to 50 times their original width. And as they expand, they stay as visible as they were when they first came out. No, something's wrong. And something's wrong with that little sophistry. Oh, I know. I think I know how I got off on this exploit thing. I started talking about how they advanced this sophistry, you know. And I was talking about that in my recent video, my other video about the nature of mass deception. Is they just stick it right in your face. That's the only way government can get away with anything. They can't keep a secret. Everybody knows that. So they just stick it in your face, and they tell you something that it's not, but that it could conceivably, theoretically, possibly in some other dimension or universe be. I mean, in another dimension or another universe, yeah, you know, thick clouds of vapor, thick clouds of persistent, expanding vapor could, you know, be expelled from the back of these engines and just stay up there for hours and days. In another universe, in another dimension, yeah, that could happen. But not in this universe, not in this dimension, no, there's no way. Not plane after plane after plane after plane after plane coming this direction, that direction, no, there's no way. And then on top of that, you got people like you got people like Al Gore and everybody going out there telling us that they're spraying millions of tons of sulphuric acid, aluminum, barium, and what's the last one? Sulphuric acid, aluminum, barium, and strontium, one of those. They tell us they're doing it. I mean, that's the way they do it. They just stick it right in your face and say, we're going to kill you. And they say it's real nice and real pretty and real friendly and make it sound like it's going to be a party. And everybody's like, okay, because we're innocent, right? And we're trusting and we're virtuous. And you know, we have a choice. Do we accept what they're telling us, or do we accept what they're communicating? Because, you know, they say that communication is what? Back in the day when I was a young man, they used to say that communication was 60% nonverbal or 40% verbal, you know. Nowadays, they're saying that communication is 7% verbal, 93%. So let's just say 10 and 90. Nowadays, they're saying communication is 90% nonverbal, right? It's context, it's body language, it's voice inflection, it's, you know, whatever. I don't know. I guess maybe that's it, but I don't know. Maybe there's more to it. So we have a choice. Do we accept what we're being told? Okay? That is to say, the substance of what we're being told, or do we accept the communication that's being delivered, which is the tone, the context, the emotional environment, you know. When my mom used to take me to painting classes when I was a little kid, and when you do watercolors, okay, the first thing you do is you prepare the canvas, you know, and watercolor is pretty cool type of painting because, you know, it's just cool. You just for like, you know, like if it's sky, you know, you make a very liquidy, very liquidy solution of blue color, and then you just run that, you know, you I forget, was it a sponge or a rag or something? You just like run it across the top of the canvas, and the watery paint blue, the blue color. Let's see, how do you say this? The blue colored water, basically, is what it is, just runs down the canvas and covers the canvas. Well, that's your background, you know. And then on top of that background, you paint your trees and your house or whatever. You know, of course, you can put blue on one side and a different color on another side. If you're painting a sunset, it might be purple or red or brown or whatever. You know, so or you could do multiple layers of this watercolor, this colored water background. You know, I mean, the emotional. That's the way I look at them. The emotional context. You know, if somebody's presenting something to you in a party-like tone, you know, in a party-like context, the emotional context of that is happiness and frivolity and joy, you know. And so, you know, somebody comes to you with a big smile and a party-like tone and says, "Hey, I'm going to murder you and your family," you know, you have a choice. Do you accept the substance of what you're being told, or do you accept the, how would you say, or do you accept, accept isn't really the right word, focus. Do you focus on the substance of what you're being told, or do you focus on the full the full, you know, what's the right word here? You know, the full portfolio of the communication. Portfolio isn't right either. The full, you know, do you focus on the substance of what you're being told, or do you focus on the entire communication? You know? Well, we're innocent, we're virtuous, we don't really want to believe, okay? On that side, they exploit those virtues, but they also exploit our vices, right? Our vices are that we're cowardly, and we're fearful, and you know, cowardice and fear can come across as innocent, can present as innocence and virtue, right? Because cowardice says, I don't want to confront an ugly substance. I don't want to, because I'm a nice person, and I like my doilies to stay clean when I'm eating my scones and drinking my tea, right? I don't want to disrupt anything. And these people are in charge, or this is a nice event, or blah, blah, blah. I don't want to disrupt things. So, yeah, innocence can, cowardice presents as innocence and virtue sometimes, doesn't it? I think it does. My opinion is that it does. And certainly we would like to pass it off that way. Nobody wants to have to confront the fact that they're cowards, right? Or that the reason they do what they do is because they're afraid, you know. So that's the chemtrail report. Hope I didn't ramble too much. I don't know. I think this stuff is fascinating. I think it's interesting. But yeah, I think what's that really awesome meme quote I've heard recently? It says that the problem with the world is that stupid people are full of confidence and smart people are full of doubts, right? That's a great, I mean, it's a funny quote, but it's also really profound, I think, and really true, and really explains a lot. Because the problem becomes when an intelligent person realizes that. That's where the real problem comes in. Because when an intelligent person realizes, when an intelligent evil person makes that observation and comes to terms with that, then they realize it's like, wait a minute, my intelligence is only part of what I need. The other thing that I need is boldness and fearlessness. Because I think it was Warren Buffett said you could take all of your IQ above 130 and sell it. You don't need it. You know, there's a limit to how much intelligence is of any value. At some point, it becomes valueless, and what you really need at some point is just the will to act. You know. Maybe the will to act is 10 times or 100 times more valuable than intelligence is, you know? So, anyway, that's what they do. They just throw it right in your face. That's the will to act right there. Because 9 out of 10 people, you know, you give them a choice of the content. Most people don't pay attention to substance anyway. Most people, honestly, I mean, think about it. 9 out of 10 people just run around robotically repeating cliches. They don't actually think about what they're saying. They just want to be accepted, so they just regurgitate, you know, time-tested, focus group-tested, well-accepted words and phrases. You know, and after a while, in like our society, you know, we have an entire lexicon, we have an entire dictionary or an encyclopedia full of cliches. I mean, there's so many cliches available to us that we can just say cliches all day long and never have to say anything original, or never even actually have to think about what we're saying. All we have to do is just think of our entire communication becomes an exercise in, you know, rifling through context, cliches in our mind that fit the context of the conversation. You know, it's like cliche speak is like its own language, isn't it? I think it is. But so yeah, with the exception of that one airplane or whatever it was, it was in the south. It's gone now. So maybe that was a contrail, because you know what? It's gone. That's what a contrail does. But I mean, that was a really, really long contrail. It lasted a very long. In other words, the plane was over here. The contrail was like consistent line all the way. You know, maybe 10 or 20 miles, I don't know. But whatever it was, it's gone now. So crazy stuff. All right, that's it. I'm going to shut up now. God bless everybody. Have a great weekend. Bye.